Carol Barrett. In March 1980, Carol Barrett, an 18-year-old from Zanesville, Ohio, set off on what was meant to be a fun spring break trip with her friends to Daytona Beach, Florida. However, the trip took a tragic turn when Carol was kidnapped from her motel room by an armed man. Despite her friends' desperate attempts to save her and extensive police efforts, Carol's body was discovered days later near Jacksonville, Florida, far from where she was last seen. For decades, her brutal slaying remained unsolved. Carol Ann Barrett was born and raised in the tight-knit community of Zanesville, Ohio, known for its strong family values. As one of 6 children, Carol grew up in a lively household filled with love and support. Her family was close, and the sense of community was always a defining part of her life. Wayne and Patricia Barrett, Carol's parents, were actively engaged in their children's lives, ensuring they had a stable and supportive upbringing. From an early age, Carol displayed resilience and independence, earning the admiration of both her family and friends. Her level-headedness and practicality were qualities that made her well-liked and respected by those who knew her. Carol possessed a calm demeanor and the ability to manage stressful situations with poise, qualities that her family believed would benefit her as she grew older. By the age of 18, Carol had cultivated a wide range of interests and a strong sense of direction for her future. As a dedicated member of her high school band, she enjoyed the travel and performance opportunities it had provided. One standout trip to Colorado sparked a love for exploring new places, further fueling her desire to experience the world. This subsequently fueled her desire to plan a spring break trip to Daytona Beach, Florida. Carol's father, Wayne Barrett, had reservations about the trip but relented. He knew how much it meant to his daughter. Carol had worked part-time at a Wendy's restaurant to save up for the trip for nearly a year. As spring break approached, the excitement was palpable. On March 20th, 1980, Carol and her friends embarked on a road trip to Florida, driving through the night. Once they arrived, they checked into the Treasure Island Inn, a well-known oceanfront hotel in Daytona Beach shores. Eager to enjoy their time away, the group quickly headed to the beach, excited for a week of fun and relaxation in the Florida sun. However, their vacation took a chilling turn in the early hours of March 23rd. After a night of socializing in the girls' oceanfront room on the 6th floor, Carol and a friend, 18-year-old Scott Grubb, left to visit a nearby store. This was around 2 a.m. As Carol and Scott made their way towards the elevator, they were suddenly confronted by a man waving a gun. The assailant aggressively forced them back towards their motel room. He demanded that they re-enter. Worried about the intruder's motives, their friend Steve insisted they couldn't access the room because they didn't have a key. However, the gunman was undeterred and shoved Steve toward the door. In fear, both Steve and Carol banged on the door until one of their friends opened it from the inside. Upon entering, the gunman seemed momentarily startled by the number of people in the room but quickly regained composure. He ordered everyone to remove their clothes and, after a tense exchange, took about $200 in cash from the group. Then, stating his need for a hostage to facilitate his escape, he initially chose 17-year-old Pam Queen. But when Pam reacted with immediate hysteria, he reconsidered. He muttered that she would be too problematic. Instead, Carol volunteered to go in her place. She opted to keep calm under pressure. The gunman instructed Carol to dress while he corralled the others, still undressed, onto the balcony. He assured them that Carol would be released within an hour. He then locked the sliding glass door behind them as he escorted Carol out of the room. Carol's friends shouted for help, but when no one responded, they knew they had to take action. One of the boys daringly crossed to an adjacent balcony. He carefully avoided a dangerous 70-foot drop. Once there, he alerted the surprised residents. They then immediately called the police. The police response was quick, but the kidnapper and Carol had a 20-minute head start. The initial search was hampered by the lack of witnesses or any clue of the vehicle used. Carol's friends provided a detailed description of the man to the police. Described as a man in his early 20s, around 5 feet 10 inches tall with reddish-brown hair. He had a beard, mustache, and a distinctive mole on his left cheek. He was last seen wearing a brown suede jacket, tan pants, and gold aviator-style glasses. Despite this detailed description, the leads were slim. The hopes that Carol would be released within an hour faded as sunrise came and went. As the hours passed with no sign of Carol, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Pam, taking on the painful duty of informing Carol's parents, relayed the devastating news. Carol's father Wayne, who had been initially reluctant about the trip, was overwhelmed with worry. He tried his best to hold on to hope due to Carol's known resilience and level-headedness. As dawn broke with no word from or about Carol, her parents, alongside her friends, clung to the hope instilled by the abductor's words. They prayed for her safe return. The FBI joined the investigation. They assisted local authorities by interviewing other guests and staff at the Treasure Island Inn. Unfortunately, no useful information emerged. The next day, Daytona Beach detectives were alerted to the discovery of a young woman's body in a remote area near the Jacksonville airport. This is almost 100 miles from where Carol was last seen. Found 30 feet from Interstate 95, the woman was dressed similarly to Carol at the time of her abduction. Two of Carol's friends traveled to Jacksonville to identify the body. They confirmed everyone's worst nightmare. Carol had met a violent end. Carol's friends and family, who held on to hope of her safe return, were devastated by the grim discovery. Despite initial promises by the abductor that she would be released, her life was senselessly taken much too soon. When discovered, Carol showed no obvious injuries despite some dried blood on her face. An autopsy later revealed she had been fatally shot once in the back of her head. This was done with a small caliber gun. She was found partially clothed with her upper body exposed. Her white sweater was over her head and her t-shirt nearby. Her jewelry remained intact. The autopsy also noted that she was assaulted. There were no defensive wounds. This suggested that Carol was probably unaware of the imminent danger and was shot execution style, likely without warning. Detectives facing a lack of leads relied on the description from Carol's friends to create a composite sketch of the suspect. This sketch was distributed to police across the country, to toll collectors on major East Coast highways, and featured in local newspapers and on television. Detectives pored over every detail from forensic evidence that the crime seemed to interviews with potential witnesses. They even analyzed traffic camera footage and questioned known criminals in the area. They took a close look at similar crimes in neighboring states, hoping for a breakthrough that would link the cases. Even after the suspect's sketch was widely circulated, weeks turned into months without any significant leads. Years passed and Carol's family, while devastated, continued to work with law enforcement. They urged them to keep the case open and the public engaged. Each year, on the anniversary of Carol's disappearance, local newspapers would feature stories reminding the community of the unresolved crime. They hoped to jog someone's memory or conscience, but eventually, the case went completely cold. It was not until August 2017 that Carol's case was reopened by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit, after a detailed review of the evidence. A few years later, in 2020, a significant breakthrough came when 65-year-old Billy Mansfield Jr. was identified as a suspect. He is a convicted serial offender and was already imprisoned since 1982 for the slayings of multiple other women. Mansfield, who was 24 at the time of Carol's tragic demise, confessed in September 2022 to being the person depicted in the initial police sketch. His confession happened after multiple interviews lasting over 2 years. He admitted to both the abduction and the violent crime. Mansfield had been convicted in 1982 of brutally taking the lives of 5 different women across California and Florida. His home in Hernando County, Florida, had the gruesome discovery site of 4 sets of human remains during the initial investigations. 2 of these remains were identified quickly, but 2 remained unidentified until February 2022. Deputies did not say how the search was narrowed to Mansfield, but Dan Jansen, Jacksonville's Sheriff's Office cold case supervisor, said that the Sheriff's Office had a partial palm print from the suspect to accompany the police sketch. Although he confessed to the Carol Barrett case in 2024, authorities chose not to pursue further prosecution. Mansfield is already serving a life sentence in California and 4 concurrent life sentences in Florida for his previous convictions. After almost 44 years, this breakthrough provided some closure to Carol's family. This confirmed the identity of the perpetrator after years of agonizing uncertainty. Blair Gilligan, Carol's niece, said she was 3 years old when her aunt's life was taken, but does remember her. She wants others to remember her as well. Blair had no memory of the day she nearly drowned as a small child, but she does know she is here today because of her Aunt Carol. She jumped in and pulled me out and gave me CPR until the ambulance came. She was a hero multiple times over. Even though Carol was young herself, Claire said she was like a second mom to me. I can remember her giving me baths, and do you remember those little oil bath beads? She would always use those. I can remember her making me corn with mozzarella cheese in it. No-bake cookies were Carol's absolute favorite, and they are also yours. Claire shared that Carol was a loving daughter, sister, and friend. A person who was trustworthy and easy to confide in, making anyone feel comfortable around her. While the resolution of the case brings some closure, it's bittersweet, as there will be no prosecution of Mansfield due to his existing life sentences. Carol's family will never see him specifically held accountable for her tragic fate. Ryan Bachman, the founder of Project Cold Case, noted that for some families, knowing who the perpetrator was and that they're no longer out there harming others is enough closure. Moving on to the next case. Alan Ruby. Many of us recognize the chilling image of Pogo the Clown, the unsettling character John Wayne Gacy portrayed in the 1970s, with his painted face and a bundle of bright balloons. This image starkly contrasts with the twisted reality of Gacy's true nature. However, not all eerie photographs are immediately apparent. Often, it's the most ordinary-looking images that hide the darkest secrets. One such example is a photo posted by 19-year-old Alan Ruby on October 12, 2014. The picture shared on his Instagram with the caption, "College wouldn't be half as great without these two peaches." Appears harmless at first glance, but the backstory behind it takes a sinister turn when it's revealed that just 3 days earlier, Ruby had brutally murdered his entire family while pretending to be unaware of the horrific events that transpired in his parents' home. John and Joy Ruby, residents of Duncan, Oklahoma, were well-known figures in the community. Both worked for the local newspaper, the Marlow Review, with John having previously served as the publisher of the Duncan Banner, until the family sold the business in 1997. Together, they had 2 children, 17-year-old Catherine, a junior at Duncan High School, and 19-year-old Alan, a student at the University of Oklahoma. The Ruby family was affluent, enjoying a lavish lifestyle. Alan, in particular, was known for his extravagant spending, often treating friends to hotel stays, traveling around Europe, and indulging in designer shoes for himself. Alan Ruby was always adorned with a gleaming Rolex and traveled first class, often looking down on his fellow students who could scarcely afford more than instant noodles for dinner. In a blog post from March 2014, he shared his obsession with luxury and excess, writing, "There is no bigger rush than getting to the register at a store and swiping your credit card. In that moment, you're waiting for the screen to say approved. You start to get heart palpitations and a rush of adrenaline. By the time she hands you your stuff, you are so high on adrenaline that the $15,000 total doesn't even faze you until you're home and see the receipts." But Ruby's taste for the good life had gotten wildly out of hand in the months leading up to the murders. In January 2014, he pleaded guilty to a charge of credit card theft after stealing his grandmother's card. He owed $491 in fines and court costs, and was scheduled to appear again in court on November 12 for his final sentencing. His parents had paid for him to go on a trip to Europe, but he had used his grandmother's credit card to pay for the experiences he had while they're racking up $5,000 in charges. 2 years before that, he had reportedly assaulted his own mother after they fought about his spending habits. She opted not to press charges. By the time of the murders, he owed $3,000 to a loan company and was being investigated for having stolen and forged $17 a half $1,000 worth of checks. The theft of his grandmother's credit card, though, was the final straw for Joy and John, who cut Ruby off financially. The family's housekeeper, Rosie, later testified that Joy had tearfully told her about the things she'd heard from a friend. Reportedly, Ruby was going around telling his friends he was going to kill us. On the morning of October 13, 2014, Rosie called the police. She was distressed and shocked and explained that she had turned up to work to find 3 Ruby family members dead. One neighbor recalled being baffled by the triple murder, stating, "They were a good family. They would always help you out. If your car wouldn't start, they'd come over and jump it, or if your dog ran off, they'd try to help you catch it. Just neighborly things." Rosie told investigators that she was not sure whether or not to report to work on the morning of 13th, as she hadn't heard from Joy. She decided to on the side of caution, and showed up at the family home anyway, where before long she discovered the bodies. Joy was on the kitchen floor, John face down in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room. The family had been dead for 4 days. Hours after the bodies of his family were discovered, Ruby was arrested in connection with the credit card theft case. When informed that his parents and sister were dead, he began, quote, wailing and crying and having a hard time. Eventually, investigators said he settled down enough for them to interview him. They noted that at this point, Ruby had become their #1 suspect in the murders, and it wasn't long before he confessed. Ruby told detectives that on October 9th, he had taken his father's gun and approached his mother first in the kitchen. When Joy turned to him, he shot her in the head. However, after collapsing on the floor, she still showed signs of life. So Ruby shot his mother once again. His 17-year-old sister, Catherine, was outside, but came impossibly after hearing the commotion. As she stepped into the kitchen, he shot her once. Ruby believed she died instantly. His father, John, was the last one to die because he had been at work all day. When he returned home about an hour after Catherine and Joy were shot, he entered the kitchen only to be met by his son. Ruby fired the gun, shooting his father in the head. Like his mother, though, his father was still alive when he hit the ground, so Ruby fired again. Following the murders, Ruby ransacked the house to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. He took the footage from his family's at-home surveillance system and fled to his university campus. He disposed of the gun and surveillance footage in a lake en route. He later traveled to Dallas, where his university was playing a sports match against the university, though he didn't attend the game. He then stayed with friends at the Ritz-Carlton in Dallas. Ruby also admitted to police that he left his phone behind when he traveled to Duncan so that his real location wouldn't be given away if investigators looked into it. He reportedly posted photos of the view from his dorm room on the night of the murders. Alan Ruby believed that by eliminating his family, he could inherit their wealth, clear his debts, and maintain his extravagant lifestyle. In February 2016, Ruby pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder as part of a plea agreement that spared him from the death penalty, which the prosecution had initially sought. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. As part of the plea deal, Ruby agreed not to contact his relatives, not to profit from his crimes through book or movie deals, and not to communicate with the media. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. Moving on to the next case. Evansdale murders. Evandale, a small city in Black Hawk County, Iowa, is located just 10 miles southeast of Waterloo, the 4th most populous city in the state. For years, the town, with a population of around 5,000, enjoyed a peaceful existence. However, since February 2012, this quiet area has become associated with a violent crime that would forever haunt its residents, leaving 2 families in desperate search of answers. This is the case of the Evansdale murders. Lyric Ray Lynn Cook was born on October 2, 2001, in Waterloo, Iowa, to Dan and Misty Morrissey. Lyric also had a brother named Dylan, with whom she shared a close bond. Both of Lyric's parents struggled with drug abuse, and as a result, Lyric was primarily raised by her grandmother, Wilma Cook. She attended Kingsley Elementary School in Waterloo, where she enjoyed playing outside, bowling, cheerleading, and gymnastics. Lyric was often described as a special young lady with an infectious personality, bringing joy to everyone around her. Lyric had a deep compassion for both her family and friends. She particularly enjoyed spending time with her grandmother, often playing card games together in the afternoons. Elizabeth June Marie Collins was born on July 3, 2003, at Allen Memorial Hospital in Waterloo, Iowa, to Drew and Heather Collins. Elizabeth grew up with 3 siblings, one brother named Kelly and 2 sisters named Amber and Kelly. She loved playing with her siblings, often taking the lead and ordering them around. Elizabeth had a bubbly personality and loved dressing up, getting her nails and hair done. She enjoyed singing, riding her bike, and playing softball and hockey. A student at Pointer Elementary School in Evansdale, she also had a dog named Gus, with whom she had become inseparable. Lyric's mother, Misty, and Elizabeth's mother, Heather, were sisters, which made Lyric and Elizabeth cousins. The 2 girls often played together, especially since Lyric spent a lot of time with her grandmother. During the summer holidays of February 2012, Lyric and Elizabeth were spending a lot of time together at their grandmother, Wilma's house, where often played cards and rode their bicycles together. On July 13, 2012, Lyric and Elizabeth were on one such bicycle ride around Evansdale. The girls' grandmother saw the girls riding their bike at around 12:15 p.m. near downtown Evansdale. The girls were seen at about 12:23 Unproven Boulevard in Evansdale and then spotted between 12:30 and 1 p.m. on Gilbert Drive, which was about 1.5 miles from their grandmother's house. The area was not far from Myers Lake, a popular fishing and recreational area. That was the last time Lyric and Elizabeth were seen alive. About 2 hours later, when the girls hadn't returned to their grandmother's house, their family began searching for them, calling friends and relatives to see if anyone had seen the girls. When they couldn't find any leads, the family contacted the police at 2:48 p.m. The Evansdale police began canvassing the area, and hundreds of volunteers from the community joined in the search for the missing cousins. Blackhawk sheriffs and the local fire department also joined in to search for the missing girls. At 4 p.m., the bikes belonging to Lyric and Elizabeth were found by local firefighters on a trail on the southeast corner of Myers Lake. Elizabeth's purse, which had a cell phone in it, was also found about 25 feet away just on the other side of the fence. But Lyric and Elizabeth were nowhere to be found. The cell phone was used by the girls to play games and was not activated to make phone calls. When the bicycles were found, it became apparent that the girls were in imminent danger and that time was of the essence. Flyers were posted throughout the community, urging for the safe return of the girls. The police intensified their search and brought in divers from Cedar Valley Underwater Search and Rescue to help search Myers Lake. Officers carefully paddled around the lake in kayaks, and a group of 3 officers walking along the southeast shoreline discovered a cup. One of the officers, wearing gloves and carrying an evidence bag, picked up the cup and took it back to a patrol car parked along the bank. Officials didn't identify the object or even confirm whether it was related to the search. After several days of setback, the lake was partially drained, but they failed to find anything. Agents from FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team were also called in for the search. Meanwhile, volunteers, searchers, and sniffer dogs searched around the lake and trails. Police even followed the sanitation crews as they collected trash throughout the community. However, nothing came of it. The police conducted hundreds of interviews and retrieved footage from security cameras. The girls were seen on one security footage obtained from an auction house in an alley located a short distance away from their grandmother's house. Soon, a tip line turned up numerous reports of articles of clothing that had been found but none belonged to the girls. Tips came from across the United States as it gained national attention. The police began to question registered sex offenders and anyone recently arrested for the sexual abuse or enticement of a minor in the area. Many of them were interviewed several times and were even asked to take a polygraph test. Unfortunately, all of them were cleared. The family and friends of the girls were also questioned and interviewed. The family members agreed to have their phones and personal computers taken for examination, but there was no sign of any suspicious activity, and all of them were cleared. Within the next few months, police began investigating Lyric's parents, Dan and Misty, although they did say they were not suspects in the disappearance. Dan and Misty were divorced, but both parents had a history of drug abuse, and her father had a history of making drugs in the house while the children were home, including the day they disappeared. Dan specifically had numerous charges going back to the 1990s, which included crimes from burglary to possession and distribution of methamphetamines in large quantities. Not long before the girls vanished, Dan was also charged with physical assault on Misty, and at the time of the girls' disappearance, he had a restraining order against him preventing him from contacting Misty. Dan was scheduled in court to testify against people he had meth deals with shortly after the girls' disappearance. At the time, Dan had pending cases against him, charging him with possessing, dealing, and making methamphetamine and a range of other drug charges that could lock him up for decades if convicted. A year and a half after the girls went missing, Dan was sentenced to 90 years in prison for drug charges. Misty also had a checkered past and was convicted in 2014 for several crimes, which included excessive alcohol and drug-related offenses. She only served a short time in prison and would be released a year later. Despite their offenses, both parents maintained they had nothing to do with the girls' disappearance. Despite extensive investigation, no new update would be received for months. Then, on December 5, 2012, hunters came across two deceased bodies in the Seven Bridges Wildlife Park near Reedland in Bremer County, a wildlife area about 25 miles from where the girls were last seen. They contacted law enforcement officials at 12:45 p.m. The next day, Chief Deputy Rick Aubin with the Black Hawk County Sheriff's Office held a press conference to announce officials were confident that the bodies were those of Lyric and Elizabeth. Aubin said there were no other missing persons cases and the remains found were of a smaller stature. The bodies were transported to the State Medical Examiner's Office in Ankeny for a positive on December 10, 2012. The Iowa State Medical Examiner's Office confirmed the bodies found were those of Lyric Cook and Elizabeth Collins. On February 6, 2013, officials announced that the trail and park at Myers Lake would be renamed to honor the memory of Lyric and Elizabeth. The trail that runs around the lake is now known as the Trail of Angels. The park next to the lake will also be known as Angels Park. The city also declared July 13th as Lyric and Elizabeth Day. According to the police, the area where the bodies were found was very isolated and not many people knew about it, suggesting that the perpetrator was familiar with the park. Authorities would never reveal the cause of death of the girls and other crucial information relating to the murder. This is usually done to help avoid false confessions, which actually did happen in this case. In February 2012, the police would receive two separate confessions claiming to be the killer. The authorities, however, were able to quickly rule them out, as they were not able to share any information that wasn't already revealed to the public. On June 24, 2013, 6 months after their bodies were found, authorities announced that they had 3 different witnesses who told police they saw a white full-sized older model SUV similar to a Chevy Suburban or Ford Bronco parked on Arbutus Avenue on July 13th, the day the girls vanished. Arbutus Avenue meets the bike trail where the girls' bicycles were located. The vehicle was described as a large and clunky white SUV and an old-style boxy Suburban. 2 of witnesses had reported seeing this white SUV parked between the bike trail signs. The other witness told police that they saw the vehicle parked near the woods on the east side of the lake, which was only a few 100 feet away from where the bikes were found. All 3 witnesses say they had seen the SUV sometime between 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. There was some criticism as to why police didn't reveal the vehicle information sooner. It was found that while 2 witnesses came forward during the initial canvassing of the area, the 3rd witness would come forward almost a year later because they assumed someone had already told police, and that police just didn't know if the information was of any significance at the time. After the 3rd witness came forward, the police forwarded this tip to the media and asked for anyone with information to come forward. Around the same time on May 20, 2013, Kathleen Shepard and Desi Hughes were walking home from their school when they were lured into a pickup truck by a man. The man drove the girls around in his truck for some time before he took them to a hog confinement site where he zip-tied their hands together. The men then took Kathleen to another part of the property. When he left, Desi was able to escape and went for help. When the police arrived at the scene, they located his truck and found him dead inside. He had taken his own life. There were, however, no signs of Kathleen. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers scoured the network of rural roads and trails in the search for the 15-year-old, deploying aircrafts and sniffer dogs. Kathleen's body would be found a few weeks later on June 7, 2013 in the Des Moines River about 20 miles downriver from the pig farm. She had been stabbed and beaten to death. The police quickly identified the kidnapper as Michael Kunder, a registered sex offender from Stratford, Iowa. Kunder had spent years in and out of prison, including time served for a 1991 conviction on charges that he kidnapped and assaulted a woman and kidnapped 2 3-year-olds. Luckily, all of the victims had survived. The abduction came less than a year after the disappearance of Lyric and Elizabeth Cook and less than 100 miles from Evansdale. Moreover, Kunder had recently been released from prison in February 2011. All of this led police to wonder if Kunder had anything to do with Lyric and Elizabeth's murders. However, on May 14, 2014, police pretty confidently said that Michael Kunder was no longer a person of interest in the Lyric and Elizabeth case. In February, a 58-year-old man named Jeff Altmeyer was arrested when he tried to lure away 2 elementary school girls while they were returning from school. It was found that he had been enticing children all over Iowa and Ottawa, Jasper, and Grundy counties. In fact, in February 2016, Jeff had attempted to lure dozens of children into his car. He was also a suspect in at least 2 other cases of sexual assault on underage girls. He would later be sentenced to life in prison for these crimes. Police investigated him as a potential lead in the Evansdale murders, but so far there is no evidence linking him to the crimes. Jeff is still a person of interest in the Evansdale murders. In February 2018, 36-year-old Teresa Guillermone crossed the train tracks with her 8-year-old son as the train approached, but then returned to the center of the tracks as the train drew near and pulled her son onto the tracks at the last moment, killing both of them instantly. Police at first thought it was a tragic accident, but after checking the CCTV footage and talking to Teresa's friends, police realized it was a murder-suicide. During their investigations, police found out that Teresa had told her community support specialists at Genesis Development, Julie Croft and Belle Plain, that she had kept a 6-page letter in a box in her house. The letter was written by the men who had supposedly killed Lyric Cook and Elizabeth Collins. Teresa said she used to hang around with these men and that they had admitted to the crime. Investigators executed a search warrant taking several items from Teresa's home. Other items found while executing the search warrant included 4 cell phones, 2 notebooks, and 2 sealed envelopes that said, "To Jeremiah from Henry" and "To Phaedra from Henry." Teresa's son was named Henry. They also found a 6-page letter, but it did not contain any additional information that Julie hadn't already told them about. Teresa also told Julie that her medications made her feel like standing in front of a train about 3 months ago. During the investigation, authorities also found that she didn't have much for immediate family. Both her parents were deceased and she had no siblings. Police believe that Teresa's mental health probably made it hard for her to differentiate what was real and what was not. It is unknown if Teresa and her son's death were linked to the Evansdale murders. Over the last few years, some have speculated that Lyric and Elizabeth's murders might be related to the February 2017 murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German in Delphi, Indiana. There were some similarities in the 2 murders, but police have since ruled out any connection between the 2 murders. The Evansdale Police Department has said that the perpetrator is likely to be local, and the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, the BU, has analyzed the case and believed that one person is responsible for the abduction and murders and released an outline of the offender's profile. The offender is believed to be familiar with both Myers Lake and Seven Bridges Wildlife Area in Bremer County. The offender selected Seven Bridges because he was familiar with how secluded the area is. The offender blends in with and maybe is part of the Evansdale, Bremer, and surrounding communities. The perpetrator most likely used quiet coercion to gain compliance, such as a ruse or threats of violence to get the girls to leave with him. During July 2012, the perpetrator may have been experiencing stress due to spousal problems, financial difficulties, legal trouble, employment difficulties, or mental health issues. The offender might avoid discussing the case or could show interest in following media coverage of the developments. They may not have a history of abducting or attempting to abduct other children or adults. After the disappearance, the suspect may have altered their appearance, changing their hairstyle or facial hair. The offender's vehicle could have been hidden, suddenly sold, or modified with a new paint job or reupholstered interior. Police have followed up on more than 1,000 leads and interviewed over 300 sex offenders. Yet the case remains unsolved. If you have any information about the murders of Lyric and Elizabeth, please contact the authorities. Carlina Renee White. Carlina Renee White was born on July 16, 1987, in New York City to Joy White and Carl Tyson. On August 4, 1987, when Carlina was just 19 old, her parents brought her to the hospital because she had a fever. At the hospital, a woman dressed as a nurse approached the parents and offered comfort, but she was not an actual hospital employee. Her name was Ann Petway. Petway had devised a plan to pose as a nurse in order to abduct a baby. After experiencing several miscarriages, Ann Petway came to the painful realization that she could no longer conceive. At 2:30 a.m. on the morning, Carlina's parents brought her to the hospital. Petway removed Carlina's foreline and abducted her. Although the hospital had video surveillance, it was not operational at the time, leaving the only description of the abductor to come from Carlina's parents, Joy White and Carl Tyson. A security guard reported seeing a woman matching the description leaving the hospital around 3:30 a.m. While no infant was visible, it was possible that the baby was concealed. The abduction of Carlina White became known as the very first known infant abduction from a New York hospital. Carlina was raised as Nedra Nadinians by Petway in Bridgeport, Connecticut. This was about 45 miles from where her parents lived. Carlina attended Thomas Hooker School and graduated from Warren Harding High School. Petway and Carlina later moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Carlina did grow suspicious in her teens that Petway was not her biological mother because she was not able to provide a birth certificate. In February 2005, Carlina was pregnant. She asked Petway to give her the birth certificate so that she could apply for health insurance. Petway then obtained a forged Connecticut birth certificate. When Carlina attempted to use it, the officials told her that it was a forged document. When confronted by Carlina, Petway finally confessed that she was not her biological mother. Petway did not tell the entire truth, however. She told Carlina that she had been abandoned by a drug addict. When Carlina was 23 years old, she used websites such as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There, she found images of the kidnapped Carlina White that resembled infant photos of herself as Nedra and those of her daughter, Simone. Carlina decided to call the center's hotline and was able to get into contact with her birth family. In February, DNA tests confirmed that she was the missing Carlina White. After the confirmation that Nedra Nance was really Carlina White, the Federal Bureau of Investigation began a search for Ann Petway. Petway turned herself into the FBI office at Bridgeport on the morning of January 23, 2011. Petway confessed and told federal investigators that she kidnapped Carlina after enduring several miscarriages because of the stress over whether she would ever be able to be a parent. On July 30, 2012, 50-year-old Ann Petway was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The judge said that she was selfish and inflicted a parent's worst nightmare on a couple. Petway served her sentence in the Federal Correctional Institution, Aliceville and Alabama, until she was released on April 14, 2021. Carlina's reunion with her parents was not so smooth. There were conflicts about money, the fact that Carlina still wanted to be called Nettie, and her love for Ann Petway. But with the last public updates, it does fortunately seem like Carlina made peace with her parents, and they are all on good terms. Moving on to the next case. Bryce Rhodes. Bryce Rhodes, 25 years old, exhibited reprehensible behavior and showed no remorse or guilt for his actions. He is accused of murdering two brothers, 14-year-old Larry Ordway and 16-year-old Maurice Gordon, whose bodies were discovered after a disturbing 911 call alerted the authorities. When their mother, Elizabeth Wren, received the heartbreaking news, her world shattered. What intensified the pain was the horrific manner in which her sons were killed, stabbed multiple times in the chest before their bodies were set on fire. The brutality of the crime left many questions unanswered, including why Bryce Rhodes would resort to such horrific violence. According to Bryce, the boys had discovered a secret of his that had the potential to ruin his life. This secret, though never fully revealed to the public, seems to have been the trigger for the unimaginable act. The possibility of losing his freedom or facing exposure may have driven him to commit such a gruesome crime. The fact that 2 young lives were taken and in such a violent manner adds to the chilling nature of the case. It raises the question of whether the secret Bryce feared was truly worth the lives of the 2 boys. The 22-year-old girl's curiosity led her to a disturbing discovery. As she investigated the abandoned building on River Park Drive, she noticed signs of a recent fire. The building, which had appeared intact the day before, was now charred and damaged, suggesting that something violent had occurred. Her decision to investigate further would later be recognized as a key turning point in a chilling case that would unfold. Upon further investigation, it became clear that the fire was connected to a much larger and more horrifying series of events. It would soon be revealed that the fire had been deliberately set, and it was linked to the gruesome murders of Larry Ordway and Maurice Gordon. Their bodies had been burned beyond recognition, and the fire was part of a horrific attempt to cover up the brutal crime. The connection between the fire and the murders became a pivotal piece of evidence for law enforcement as they began to piece together the disturbing circumstances surrounding the boys' deaths. The fact that this discovery was made by an ordinary individual, simply out of curiosity, turned out to be a crucial development in the investigation. It highlighted the potential for the smallest details to help unravel a horrifying mystery. Amidst the mess of the burned building, she spotted something strange, a shape that seemed out of place. As she went closer, her heart pounded with fear as she discovered it was a dead body. But the surprises didn't end there. Not far away she had found another body, and both of them were badly burned. Feeling extremely scared, she quickly called the police for help. The area quickly became flooded with police officers working to unravel the strange events that had occurred there the previous night. The crime scene was so horrific that the police described it as the worst they had ever encountered. One officer, visibly shaken, had to pause, unable to contain his emotions as he covered the 2 lifeless bodies with a white cloth. The bodies were quickly transported to the hospital for an autopsy by pathologists. In the meantime, the remaining officers continued to search the scene meticulously for any potential clues to aid in the investigation. After the autopsies, it was revealed that the cause of death wasn't the fire, but something even more sinister. According to a document released from the coroner's office, both boys had suffered severe head injuries from blunt force trauma, as well as stab wounds to their chests. What's even more chilling is that they had already died hours before their bodies were set on fire and left at the scene. Now, to begin their murder investigation and gather clues, the police needed to figure out who the boys were and why someone would harm them in such a terrible manner. Despite the bodies being badly burned, the police had a stroke of luck as they managed to create sketches of the boys. The sketches were released to the public, accompanied by a plea for anyone who might recognize them to come forward and assist in their identification. However, the authorities didn't rely solely on the sketches. They also scoured missing persons reports from the days leading up to the discovery, hoping victims' descriptions. Unfortunately, their efforts led to no answers. As the days passed and Monday arrived and departed, no one came forward to identify the 2 boys. The following day, on May 23, 2016, a worried woman named Elizabeth Wren rushed to the police station. She was visibly anxious as she told the officers the sketches they had released were of her sons, 14-year-old Larry Ordway and 16-year-old Maurice Gordon. Elizabeth was shocked when the officers delivered the heartbreaking news that her sons' bodies had been found completely burned. The police told her that they were suspecting foul play and believed it wasn't just an accident, but rather a carefully planned murder. Elizabeth desperately wanted to see her sons one last time, but the officers had to gently refuse her request. The bodies were in such a horrible state that it wouldn't have been appropriate for a mother to witness. Despite feeling utterly helpless, Elizabeth gathered her strength and shared a crucial piece of information with the police. Elizabeth recounted to the police how on the evening of May 21, 2016, her sons had informed her that they were going out with some friends whom she had never liked. Despite her attempts to prevent her sons from hanging out with these friends in the past, they still went ahead. That night, they headed to a party with 3 individuals: 17-year-old Jackery Taylor, 15-year-old Antoine Carter, and 25-year-old Bryce Rhodes. Elizabeth expressed her concern about Bryce, who had a troubling criminal history involving various serious offenses, like domestic violence, physical offenses, kidnapping, and even abusing individuals. The boys assured Elizabeth they'd return soon, and even though days had passed without any sign of them, she didn't worry much. They had a habit of partying and sometimes not coming home for days, so she thought it was just another one of those times. However, little did she know, this time would bring devastating news that would change her life forever. The police wasted no time in tracking down the entire group. They quickly found Antoine Carter and brought him in for questioning. Meanwhile, they continued their search for Bryce, and by the next day, Tuesday, May 24, 2016, they had located him as well. Another member of the group, Jackery Taylor, was also apprehended on the same day, all within a short span of time. Bryce and Jackery spent hours in police custody, as each were speaking separately with detectives about Larry and Maurice. The detectives tried to make Jackery nervous by showing him crime scene photos of the two brothers, hoping to coax information about the murders. However, all Jackery said was that he was friends with the brothers but had nothing to do with their deaths. On the other hand, Bryce insisted to police that he had no idea where the brothers were and eventually requested a lawyer. When Jackery and Bryce didn't provide any useful information, the police decided to change their approach. During separate interviews with Amwin, they noticed a difference in his demeanor. That's when Amwin finally opened up what exactly happened on the evening of May 21st. He explained that Bryce had called him and Jackery to his apartment that evening. There Bryce confided in them and expressed his suspicion that Larry and Maurice might tell the police about something they had seen on May 4, 2016, which was Bryce's biggest secret. Bryce managed to persuade Jackery and Amwin to assist him with a plan that involved something terrible, killing the brothers. On the night of May 21st, Jackery went to their house and convinced the brothers to come out, by telling them that Bryce was going to take them to a party. Larry and Maurice were a bit unsure at first, but eventually they agreed to go along. As they had left the house, they assured their mother Elizabeth that they would be back later that night. The group had driven to Bryce's house, which he shared with his mother, who happened to be out of town that weekend. As the boys settled in, they began hanging out and having a good time, just like any other party. But Larry and Maurice had no idea that there was something sinister brewing behind the scenes. Suddenly, out of nowhere, an argument broke out among the group and ruined the fun atmosphere of the party. Anjuin told the police that Jackery accused the brothers that they had stolen money from Bryce. When Jackery confronted Maurice about the theft, he became furious. At that moment, Maurice felt threatened and could sense the danger, so he grabbed a knife to save him and his brother, which escalated the whole situation. Anjuin stated that when Maurice pulled out the knife, Bryce quickly stepped in and took it away. Then they both managed to overpower the brothers and tied them up with belts. They separated Larry from Maurice so that both brothers wouldn't be able to fight back and left him in the bathroom, while Bryce brought Maurice to his knees in the living room. Maurice pleaded for their lives, but Bryce demanded that he beg for forgiveness. It was a tense moment as Jackery and Anwin watched Maurice tearfully beg for forgiveness, hoping to save himself and his brother from whatever was about to happen next. Bryce's cruelty knew no bounds. After laying a blanket on the floor under Maurice, he had covered his head with stockings and shoved a rag into his mouth. Then, in a shocking act of violence, Bryce began mercilessly beating Maurice and stabbing him over and over again in the chest. The other teens watching were terrified and shaken by the gruesome and horrific scene unfolding before them. Bryce, with his menacing demeanor, threatened the boys who were witnessing the horror and pressured Anjuin into stabbing Maurice once in the chest. Fearing Bryce's wrath, Anjuin reluctantly obeyed his command and stabbed Maurice. Anjuin continued his chilling account and revealed that once Maurice was dead, Bryce forcefully brought Larry out of the bathroom to the living room where his brother's blood was covering the floor. It was a heartbreaking moment for Larry as he realized his brother was now dead. Maurice's lifeless body was moved aside as Bryce turned his attention to Larry. And one vividly remembered Larry's painful voice when he pleaded with Bryce to spare him. But it was all in vain. Larry was subjected to the same horrific treatment as his brother. Amwin still heard Larry's desperate pleas before Bryce had stabbed him a shocking 20 times in the chest. Once again, Bryce threatened Jackery and forced him to stab Larry once. With both Maurice and Larry now dead, Bryce loaded their bodies into the car and called another friend to help dispose of them. As Bryce and his friend drove off with the brothers' lifeless bodies in the back seat, Anjuan and Jackery were left behind at the apartment as Bryce instructed them to clean up the gruesome scene. Anjuan continued his confession by revealing that Bryce drove their lifeless bodies to an abandoned lot and set them on fire. As the flames engulfed Maurice and Larry, their bodies burned that fateful night. However, by some stroke of luck, their bodies hadn't turned to ashes. After Anwen's interrogation, the police finally uncovered the horrifying truth about how Larry and Maurice met their tragic end. However, there were still lingering questions in their minds. What was the brothers' connection to Bryce? And what was the secret that led to such a dreadful fate for the siblings? Larry and Maurice were just regular teenagers who enjoyed life. And even though they were stepbrothers, they shared a strong bond. But things took a turn when they met Bryce in February 2015, and his cool personality caught their attention right away. Bryce was a rapper, and he had a bunch of music videos online that made him seem super successful and rich. Larry and Maurice were impressed by his lifestyle and charisma, and soon found themselves drawn into his world. When they all became close, Bryce introduced them to one of his friends, 17-year-old Jackery Taylor. As the three boys hung out with Bryce more and more, they met a fourth teenager, 14-year-old Amon Carter, who also joined their group in February 2015. They all used to spend a lot of time with Bryce as he would drive them around, buy them clothes and food, and even give them money to spend as they pleased. In an interview with the police, Jackery revealed that Bryce used to promise them that they would become famous if they followed in his footsteps. As time went on, the boys seemed to embrace Bryce's gangster lifestyle more and more. They even appeared in some of his music videos, giving off the impression that they were adopting his mentality. Elizabeth noted a change in their behavior during this period. Their social media accounts started to fill up with pictures of them posing with fake weapons, showing off stacks of cash and smoking cigars, along with images of women. They also began attending parties regularly and would sometimes stay out for days. On May 4, 2016, they were returning from one such party late at night, around 12:30 a.m. Maurice was driving Bryce's car with Jackery in the passenger seat and Bryce and Larry in the back, while Anwen was following behind them in a truck. Suddenly, brakes of his car when he spotted a man walking on the sidewalk of the 800 block of South 41st Street in Louisville, Kentucky. As he strained to remember where he knew him from, it soon clicked that he was Christopher Jones, the 40-year-old man that local gangs were after. But Bryce made a serious mistake. He wrongly identified Christopher, thinking he was someone else trying to collect the reward placed on his head. It was such a mistake that it changed everything in an instant. In a moment of panic, Bryce quickly pulled out his gun and shot Christopher in the chest from the car window. As Christopher fell down, all the teens were stunned by witnessing a murder in front of their eyes. Without even stopping to think, they drove away from there as fast as they could, feeling scared and full of adrenaline. After the shooting, Christopher was rushed to emergency surgery, but sadly, he didn't make it and died during the operation. Bryce had driven the boys home and warned them not to breathe a word about what happened that night. But over the next 2 weeks, Larry and Maurice couldn't shake off the horror of what they had seen. They started avoiding Bryce more and more as they felt uneasy about being around him. Meanwhile, Bryce was feeling anxious too. He worried that the brothers might spill the beans about the shooting to everyone and he would be in serious trouble. So he made a decision to end their lives on the evening of May 21, 2016. In a short period, Bryce made a grave decision to take the lives of 3 people, all to protect himself. But now the consequences of his actions are closing in on him. Following the interrogations, both Jackery and Anwen admitted guilt to 3 counts of aiding in murder and tampering with evidence. Because they were under 18 years old, they were sentenced to serve 10 years in juvenile detention centers, with the remainder to be served in adult prisons once they turned 18. As part of their agreements, they were also required to testify against Bryce during his trial. Ever since Bryce was arrested, he made a mess of the court hearings. The victims' families thought he did it on purpose. They believed he was trying to cause chaos because he knew the prosecution wanted the death penalty. He thought if he made enough trouble and delayed the process, they might not give him the death penalty. At first, Bryce did something shocking. He spit on his court-appointed attorney because he found out the attorney was friends with the victim's grandfather. This caused a big problem, and the attorney had to leave the case due to a conflict of interest. Later, there was even a fight between Bryce and the attorney. Bryce even made a threatening statement. "I'll see you when I get out." Because of this threat, in future courtroom appearances, Bryce was restrained to his chair and made to wear a spit mask. But even with these measures, his behavior didn't improve. In one hearing, he even threatened the judge and her family. Bryce's antics in the courtroom didn't stop there. Many times he refused to let his attorney speak for him and claimed that he didn't trust them. He even went through 3 different state-appointed attorneys because of this. It was like he was determined to do things his own way no matter what anyone else had said. After this courtroom appearance in February 2017, Bryce also tried to escape from prison by digging a hole in his cell. However, officers found the hole and also uncovered a threatening note he sent to Jackery. The note read, "Rats get exposed. Show me that you're not a rat." This showed Bryce's determination to manipulate even from behind bars. In another shocking incident captured on court video, Bryce displayed shameless behavior as he was seen in the video blowing kisses at the mother of the victims. It was a disturbing display of his lack of remorse or guilt for his action. The trial kept getting postponed over and over again, and Elizabeth was becoming increasingly frustrated. Not only with the delays but also with Bryce's attitude in the courtroom. During one hearing, her emotions overwhelmed her, and she had to be removed from the courtroom. Later, when talking to journalists, she revealed that despite trying to find forgiveness through her faith, she couldn't shake the pain of losing her 2 boys to this monster. She described Bryce as sick and a demon, which highlighted the depth of her anguish and anger towards him. After 6 long years of Bryce's senseless behavior and intense courtroom drama, justice was finally served in 2022. Bryce Rhodes was convicted of stabbing and burning the bodies of teenage brothers, murder charges. Along with the 3 murder charges, the jury also found Bryce guilty of tampering with physical evidence and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. For the murders, the jury recommended a life sentence without parole. Additionally, they suggested 5 years for tampering with evidence and 1 year for each count of abuse of a corpse. While he wasn't eligible for the death penalty, Bryce's sentences will run concurrently, which means he'll spend the rest of his days behind bars unless his defense wins an appeal. After the verdict, the teen brother's grandmother Deborah Wren was emotional while sharing her memories. During the trial, the jury had to think about Bryce Rhodes' mental state when deciding what punishment he should face. The defense brought in Rhodes had an intellectual disability. They also noted that he had ADHD and bipolar disorder, but they believed he hadn't received the necessary support or education to cope with these challenges. Despite these points, the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution and the victim. What are your thoughts on the case? How do you think the absence of positive adult role models contributed to the vulnerability of the teenage boys involved? What steps can be taken to prevent similar incidents involving manipulation and violence among vulnerable youth in the future? Moving on to the next case. Autumn Lane McClure. For 20 years, the people of Ormond Beach, Florida were haunted by the unsolved disappearance of Autumn Lane McClure. The 16-year-old went missing in May 2004, leaving behind a trail of questions and a family desperate for answers. Initially treated as a missing persons case, the investigation took a disturbing turn years later when new evidence suggested foul play. Autumn was a lively and energetic 16-year-old student at Mainland High School in Ormond Beach. Known for her radiant personality and friendly smile, she lived with her grandmother. Autumn McClure worked part-time at the local Winn-Dixie grocery store, where she was a familiar face to many in her community before her mysterious disappearance. On May 10, 2004, her grandmother reported her missing after Autumn's boyfriend claimed he had dropped her off at the Volusia County Mall. In the early stages of the investigation, her grandmother received several letters and phone calls, allegedly from Autumn. The letter stated that she was fine and would return home once she turned 18. But Autumn was never seen or heard from again. Initial investigations centered on retracing Autumn's last known movements and speaking to those close to her. Autumn's boyfriend was among the first individuals questioned, but he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Despite a continued search for Autumn, no significant leads or evidence emerged that could provide an explanation for her disappearance. Autumn's grandmother, who had been her primary caregiver, played a key role in keeping the case in the public eye, ensuring that her granddaughter's disappearance was never forgotten. Over the years, the investigation was marked by fluctuating periods of activity and frustrating lulls. However, investigators remained committed, periodically re-interviewing witnesses, gathering DNA from family members, and pursuing any new leads that emerged. One lead came in 2016 when Autumn's former boyfriend, previously thought to have dropped her at the mall, confessed to investigators that he had actually dropped her off at the Seabreeze Bridge. She was then picked up from there by her grocery store co-worker, Jessica Freeman. Detectives learned that Autumn had been staying with Jessica and her boyfriend, Brian Donnelly, who at the time was 31 years old. The couple admitted that Autumn had stayed with them for a brief time because she was allegedly having problems at home with her grandmother. They provided little information that could help investigators locate Autumn, claiming ignorance. Interviews with Jessica in February 2018, who was living in Nevada at the time, yielded no new information. She continued to deny any knowledge of Autumn's fate. It was not until several years later that the case saw a significant breakthrough. In 2021, authorities received a crucial tip that would break the case wide open. Chris Miller, a relative of Jessica and Brian, came forward, blaming that either or both of them were involved in a teenage girl's demise in Volusia County. This tip reopened the case with renewed determination. It led to a controlled call set up by the police. Jessica then admitted that she saw Brian Donnelly end Autumn's life. Donnelly passed away during a medical procedure on May 26, 2022 without facing charges. In the wake of his passing, detectives re-interviewed Jessica, who was granted immunity by prosecutors. After securing her immunity deal, she confessed that Autumn had been living with herself and Donnelly in the Shady Oaks mobile home park. Autumn was involved in an inappropriate and intimate relationship with them before her disappearance. Jessica also told investigators that she had seen Donnelly choking Autumn in their trailer's bathroom. But by the time she intervened, Autumn was already lifeless. He then threatened Jessica, saying that she would face the same consequences if she went to the police. Authorities said they believed the motive was Autumn planned to go back home, and Donnelly was afraid if she returned home and disclosed their relationship, he would face charges. Jessica also provided investigators with crucial information on the location where Autumn's body would be buried. She pinpointed the place to the 1300 block of Hand Avenue in Ormond Beach. She recalled how Brian Donnelly had revisited the property in late 2021 or early 2022. He had seemed satisfied to find that a new home was being constructed over the area where he had allegedly hidden Autumn's body. In 2023, authorities were able to cooperate with the new owner of a trailer home on the property to conduct an excavation. Utilizing ground-penetrating radar, investigators found irregularities in the soil beneath where the trailer once stood. 20 years after her disappearance, in 2024, the meticulous search allowed investigators to recover 99.9% of Autumn's remains. The discovery of her remains has offered a small sense of peace for her twin brother and the rest of her living family members, who have endured years of uncertainty and pain. While the recovery of her remains and Jessica's confession does provide long-awaited answers, it also gives the family a chance to finally mourn and honor Autumn's memory properly. While justice in a traditional sense is unattainable due to Donnelly's prior passing, knowing Autumn's fate, as terrible as it was, does provide closure on a chapter that has haunted her family for nearly 2 decades. Volusia Sheriff Mike Chidwood expressed his frustration with the situation, saying, "The sad part is he will never face in this world for the evil he perpetrated. I am hoping to God that when he takes his last breath that maybe he has a vision of where he was headed." His words reflect the profound sense of injustice that persists in cases where those responsible for such heinous acts are not held accountable in their lifetimes. This sheriff's statement also highlights the emotional toll on those seeking justice, as they await closure and accountability for the crimes committed. Victoria Rickman. On September 13, 2013, the Atlanta Police Department received a frantic call from 30-year-old Victoria Rickman, who tearfully claimed that she had shot her boyfriend. Upon responding to the call, police arrived at a residence on Clifton Road in DeKalb County, Georgia, where they found the lifeless body of 30-year-old William Carter Jr., his body covered in blood and multiple gunshot wounds. The circumstances surrounding this tragic event sparked questions about what truly transpired that night. Was it a straightforward case of self-defense? Or was there more to the story than initially appeared? Victoria, affectionately called Tori by those close to her, had married young. However, her marriage ended in divorce after a few challenging years, marked by mutual allegations of abuse from both parties. This turbulent history would later cast a shadow over her relationship with William Carter Jr., raising questions about the events leading up to the fatal shooting. Amidst the struggles, there was a silver lining. Victoria gave birth to a son, who, according to loved ones, became her pride and joy and the center of her world. In 2010, a few years after her divorce, Victoria began a relationship with local businessman William Carter Jr. Like Victoria, William was also divorced and had a child of his own. The two met through mutual acquaintances and quickly bonded over their shared interests. Victoria and William's children, Victoria's son and William's daughter, were around the same age, which helped strengthen their connection. As their relationship progressed, they became engaged and decided to live together. However, what had started as a promising relationship quickly began to unravel. Frequent arguments became a regular occurrence, and eventually, they started living separate lives. Victoria made disturbing allegations against William, accusing him of abuse during their time together. Victoria described several instances where William allegedly became physically violent, leaving visible marks on her body. Her friends, alarmed by her growing distress, became increasingly concerned for her safety as she opened up about the altercations. Over the course of their turbulent 3-year relationship, Victoria and William accumulated a series of police reports documenting various incidents, ranging from domestic disputes to allegations of assault and battery. Despite the escalating conflicts, they somehow always found a way to reconcile. However, on that fateful September day, the situation reached its breaking point. Around 2:30 a.m. on September 13, 2013, Victoria Rickman called the Atlanta Police Department, claiming she had shot her boyfriend, William Carter, in self-defense after he attacked and assaulted her in a violent rage. Victoria explained that she hadn't intended to kill him, but had acted to protect herself. Officers quickly arrived at her residence on Clifton Road in Atlanta, Georgia. The lead detective on the case, Summer Benton, was highly respected within the Atlanta Police Department, having worked on 65 homicide cases. When Benton first heard about Victoria's call, she remained open-minded, offering her the benefit of the doubt, but emphasized that the investigation was just beginning. When Detective Benton and her team arrived at the scene, they were followed by a television crew from the series Inside Homicide, capturing the moment Victoria stood in the doorway wearing pajamas, her hair wet, and holding her small dog. She told the officers, "He hit me again and I shot him." However, there were no visible signs of injury on her, and the home appeared undisturbed with nothing out of place. Officers proceeded to the back bedroom where they found William's body lying on the bed, his body riddled with multiple gunshot wounds. William's body was found naked, his watch placed on the nightstand, and a gold chain necklace clutched in his left hand. Nearby, his clothes were scattered on the floor, and a pair of Victoria Rickman's underwear was found wrapped around a used tampon. After the discovery, William's body was transported to the medical examiner's office, and Victoria was taken to Grady Hospital for a physical examination and a forensic kit. During the examination, she told the physician that William had forcibly raped her, then restrained and assaulted her. She stated that in an act of self-defense, she had grabbed a gun from the nightstand and shot him. The results of the examination raised significant doubts about Victoria's account. While DNA swabs matched a partial profile of William's DNA, the physician found no injuries on Victoria that aligned with her description of the events, nor any signs of trauma to her abdominal cavity. By the time Detective Benton was made aware of this, she had already begun to question Victoria's story. This growing skepticism was evident when Benton discussed the case with the prosecutor. Meanwhile, back at the scene, captured on the reality TV show, police found a total of 9 shell casings and 1 lone bullet scattered across the bedroom, adding to the mounting questions about the circumstances of William's death. The murder weapon, a .40 caliber semi-automatic firearm, was found inside the nightstand drawer on the side of the bed, farthest from William's body. Blood spatter was observed down on the wall, floor, curtains, window, and a pillow on the floor. The state's crime scene expert analyzed the blood spatter patterns and determined that William was shot in the back while standing and facing the bedroom wall. He then fell onto the bed where the remaining shots were fired. An autopsy revealed that William was shot 9 times. William Carter sustained a total of 9 gunshot wounds, 3 to the chest, 3 to the back, 1 to the arm, and 2 to the head. 3 of the gunshot wounds showed evidence of stippling, indicating close-range firing, while the other 6 did not. Additionally, William had bruises on his chin and left arm, likely caused by a blunt object. The medical examiner's conclusion was unequivocal. William Carter died from the fatal consequences of his gunshot wounds. After her hospital examination, Victoria underwent a rigorous interrogation by Detective Benton. Throughout the questioning, Victoria consistently maintained that she acted in self-defense, claiming that William had a history of abuse and that this was not the first time he had been violent with her, though he had never faced consequences for his actions. However, when pressed for more details, Victoria refused to continue without legal representation. She was then subjected to a thorough examination for injuries, and photographs were taken as evidence. Tensions escalated during a later round of questioning when Victoria was asked to hand over her phone, further heightening the intensity of the investigation. After a grueling interrogation, Victoria received the grim news. She was being arrested and charged with her boyfriend's murder. A mere 6.5 hours after the incident, Detective Benton noted Victoria's lack of emotion at the news. According to her, she didn't bat an eye. Was it shock or indifference that kept her expressionless? To unravel the case, detectives knew they had to dig deeper. While Victoria remained in custody, the investigation moved forward. As is common in many cases, the inquiry began at the victim's doorstep, this time his parents' home. William James Carter and Cairo Chisholm Carter were reeling from the shock of their son's sudden death. From the outset, William's parents were skeptical of Victoria's self-defense claim, doubting her version of events and raising questions about what really happened that night. In a chat with Detective Benton, William's father recounted a troubling episode involving his son in January 2012, more than a year prior. That day, William had arrived at his parents' residence, visibly injured and bleeding. He bore a wound to the back of his head and a bite mark on his shoulder. According to William Sr., his son claimed that during a heated altercation with Victoria, she had attacked him with a hammer and bitten him on the shoulder. Victoria didn't stop there either. Victoria even told officers that she had struck William on the head with a hammer in self-defense, showing bruises on her wrists as proof of the altercation. However, William denied her account, insisting that Victoria had simply lost control. Despite the mounting evidence and his parents' warnings, William ended up getting arrested and charged with battery and assault. Despite the legal trouble and his parents' concerns, he chose to reconcile with Victoria, attempting to patch things up despite the escalating tensions in their relationship. But even his parents got a first-hand taste of Victoria's temper when they made it crystal clear that she wasn't welcome in their home. The charges against William were eventually dropped when Victoria came clean to prosecutors, admitting she had fabricated the assault claims. Unfortunately, their ugly fights didn't end there. In May 20, 2013, Victoria forcefully entered William's home in Cobb County without permission, grabbed him by his gold necklace and forcibly led him around the house, demanding to know who he had been speaking to. Despite William's effort to remove her from his home, she ran through the neighborhood alleging assault. Police intervention followed, and when they arrived, Victoria reversed her stance, accusing William of assaulting her. This time, it was Victoria who found herself in handcuffs, facing battery charges. Those charges were still hanging over her head when William met his untimely end. For William's parents, it appeared that their son had become a victim of a fatal pattern of abuse, with them claiming that Victoria had consistently subjected him to mistreatment and violence. They claimed Victoria had even taken photos to document her bruises in the past. Victoria's dad, Paul Rickman, couldn't wrap his head around how his daughter wound up in such a mess. However, Victoria's best friend, Brittany Morgan, was convinced that on that fateful night, Victoria was left with no other option. Scrutiny also fell upon the murky history of William Carter. As it turned out, his past wasn't as squeaky clean as it seemed at first glance. Years prior, William had a criminal record marked by arrests for property damage and drug-related offenses. Even his own parents acknowledged his struggles with drug addiction at one point. After nearly a decade of battling addiction, he took the step to check himself into rehab and made a remarkable turnaround in his life. But the question remained, was this trouble past enough to substantiate Victoria's claims of abuse? For Victoria's close circle of France, the answer was clear. It was more than enough to support her allegations. They firmly believed that she was desperately trying to escape from the toxic relationship. In fact, just 4 months before the fatal incident, in May 2013, Victoria took steps to seek a restraining order against William in Cobb County Court. Although the office was closed on that day, a sheriff's deputy named Frederick Price, who was working there, noticed her bruises and intervened. Concerned for her safety, Price provided her with a .40 caliber semi-automatic gun for protection. He even took her to a gun range for practice, convinced that she was genuinely in danger. Ironically, it was this very same gun that Victoria ended up using to fatally shoot her lover. As speculation swirled regarding which party had posed the greater threat, William or Victoria, the case became a focal point of controversy, dividing opinions and communities alike. Meanwhile, Victoria found herself confined to the DeKalb County Jail. The request for bail had been denied, and all she could do was wait for her day in court. Just when the dust seemed to settle, the reality TV show Inside Homicide dropped their own episode, delving deep into the story of Victoria Rickman and William Carter. The spotlight was mainly on Detective Summer Benton's investigation. Painting a narrative that leaned heavily aired for public entertainment could seriously jeopardize Victoria's chances of receiving a fair trial. To provide Victoria with a platform to share her side of the story, reporter Erin Moriarty of 48 Hours arranged an interview with Victoria via an inmate video calling system before her murder trial. In the interview, Victoria stuck to her self-defense narrative while also voicing her concerns about the investigation not being conducted thoroughly and the detectives jumping to conclusions about her guilt too fast. During the interview, Victoria made a startling revelation, claiming that on the night of the murder, William was acting erratically. Unfortunately, this claim couldn't be substantiated as Detective Benton never requested William's toxicology report following his death. Later, Benton admitted that as it was her first homicide case in DeKalb County, she was unaware of the different procedural requirements. Victoria, however, didn't believe that was the case. After spending nearly 4 years behind bars, Victoria's trial finally began on August 22, 2017. Much like the case itself, the trial proved to be anything but straightforward, with both sides presenting their evidence in an attempt to sway the jury. In the DeKalb County courtroom, defense lawyer Amanda Clark Palmer found herself going head-to-head with attorney Sheila Ross. Renowned as one of Georgia's most formidable prosecutors, the stage was set for a legal battle of epic proportions. The prosecution opened by alleging that Victoria deliberately murdered her boyfriend in a premeditated act of violence. In contrast, the defense argued that Victoria acted out of fear and self-defense, emphasizing killing William was never her intention. Palmer also highlighted the traumatic impact of the biased investigation and the sensationalized TV show episode on the case. During the second day of the trial, Detective Benton took the stand reiterating her belief that there was no evidence of a struggle at the crime scene. However, the defense countered this statement, presenting evidence suggesting that there were indeed a few signs of struggle within the house. During the questioning about the murder weapon, Detective Benton's testimony brought up a pivotal moment in the trial. Benton stated her belief that the gun could hold 12 bullets. However, 9 shell casings were found at the scene, and the gun still had 4 bullets left in it, totaling 13 bullets. Benton concluded that Victoria must have reloaded the gun during the incident, a detail she had previously shared with the cameras. The gun doesn't hold 13. For some reason, this girl, she did a tactical reload. In reality, the gun had a capacity of 13 bullets from the start. This revelation was crucial because according to Benton's theory, Victoria reloading the firearm would imply premeditation, undermining her claim of self-defense. Despite Palmer's strong criticism of this error, Detective Benton maintained that this mistake did not alter the overall conclusion of the case. The prosecution sought to depict Victoria as an individual who used her physical appeal to entice men and manipulate them into fulfilling her desires. To bolster their argument, they called Jeremy Fordham to the stand, a former acquaintance of Victoria's to whom she had previously sent explicit pictures. Additionally, County Police Lieutenant Robbie Ray testified that he had engaged in flirtatious text exchanges with Victoria following his assistance with the legal matter she had. Next up on the witness stand was Rick Price, the same deputy who had given her the gun in the first place. When asked about his relationship with Victoria, Price's response was cryptic. It's worth noting that Price was the first person Victoria contacted after the shooting, even before calling 911. This raised suspicions about Victoria's influence over men. Adding to the intrigue, Price was terminated from his previous job just 5 days after William Carter's murder, reportedly due to his lack of cooperation with the investigation. The prosecution contended that Victoria deliberately led William to his demise that fateful night. They also argued that Victoria's multiple shots at William were excessive and constituted overkill. In contrast, the defense asserted that Victoria acted out of fear for her life when William unexpectedly showed up at her house and assaulted her. Palmer also played Victoria's emotional 911 call, suggesting that it reflected genuine fear and helplessness. According to the defense, Victoria felt utterly defenseless during the assault by William, leading her to use the weapon in a desperate attempt to protect herself. However, the prosecution alleged that in the past, Victoria had made similar accusations against some people and had also threatened to make false allegations against a few others. To reinforce this argument, they called William Plunkett, Victoria's former roommate, to the witness stand. Plunkett testified that Victoria had threatened him when he attempted to evict her from his residence. The defense also called Victoria's friends to the stand who testified to seeing bruises on Victoria's body on previous occasions. Victoria's friend, Brittany, recalled an incident where she witnessed Victoria receiving an angry phone call from William just months before the murder. Additionally, the defense presented William's psychiatrist, Dr. John Lockridge, who made a startling revelation. He stated that just 3 days before his death, William reported experiencing delusions. Lockridge also testified that William had been prescribed an antidepressant to aid his sleep. However, because Detective Benton had failed to request a toxicology report, it remained unknown what drugs William had in his system on the night of his murder, and whether they could have influenced his mental state. The defense claimed that on the night William Carter died, he stormed into Victoria's house in a fit of jealousy after catching her chatting with another guy on the phone earlier that day. Defense attorney Palmer even read out furious texts William had sent to Victoria just hours before his death. While the defense had some valid points, the prosecution came prepared with their own ammunition, dropping a few bombshells as the trial unfolded. It came to light that just months before the trial began, Detective Kevin Leon Packer cracked the code on one of Victoria's cell phones, unearthing a treasure trove of information. The phone yielded over 66,000 texts, totaling some 4,000 pages of messages sent and received by Victoria. This wealth of data helped investigators piece together a timeline of events on the night of September 13, 2013. Earlier that evening, Victoria informed contents of their conversation remained unknown. It was determined that William showed up at the house sometime after midnight. Detectives also discovered a series of photos in Victoria's possession documenting her bruises, all taken just a day before the murder occurred. Leon Packer also disclosed that William's text to Victoria displayed his fury over her contacting his ex-wife. William had even texted Victoria indicating his decision to end their relationship. Leon Packer read one of these texts aloud during the court proceedings. In one of these messages, William also mentioned his intention to pursue criminal charges against Victoria for the May 2013 incident. The prosecution speculated that Victoria may have been concerned that an defense countered by highlighting how around the same time also held a video that served as a startling piece of evidence. As it turned out, in May 2013, when Victoria allegedly showed up unannounced at William's house and refused to leave, she had recorded a video of their heated altercation on her own cell phone. This footage depicted Victoria attempting to re-enter William's home mere moments after alleging she had been assaulted by him. The prosecution presented the entirety of the 60-second video, arguing that it did not depict the interaction one would expect between the woman who had just been assaulted and the alleged perpetrator. By showcasing this video, the prosecution sought to undermine Victoria's declaration that William had assaulted her on the night of his murder, casting doubt on the credibility of her self-defense claim. As the 2-week trial drew to a close, both sides delivered impassioned closing statements. Prosecutor Sheila Ross pulled no punches, asserting that Victoria was not a victim of abuse. She emphasized that Victoria couldn't have planned the events, as she didn't know William was coming over. Palmer concluded her statement by once again criticizing Detective Summer Benton's handling of the investigation. On September 1, 2017, after less than an hour of deliberation, the jury reached a guilty verdict. And sure enough, it was justice for those seeking closure for William Carter. On October 5, 2017, a month after filing her motion for a new trial, 34-year-old Victoria returned to court for her sentencing hearing. This time, she chose to address the court directly, hoping for leniency. But she did not offer an apology to William's family. In response, Judge J.P. Belay showed no mercy, sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In an exclusive phone interview with Crime Watch Daily following her sentencing, Victoria harshly criticized the justice system, expressing her frustration with how her case had been handled. Victoria firmly denied the media's portrayal of her as a murdering seductress, expressing strong disapproval of the decisions made by both the jury and the judge. She made it clear that she was determined to continue fighting for a new trial. On October 1237, Victoria filed a motion for a new trial, arguing that her original defense counsel had been ineffective. However, after a hearing, the trial court denied her request. According to prison records, Victoria remains incarcerated at Pulaski State Prison in Hawkinsville, Georgia, with little chance of gaining freedom in the near future. Reflecting on the tragedy, William Carter's mother expressed deep sorrow, acknowledging the profound impact of her son's death on everyone who knew him. However, she noted that the most significant loss was felt by William's daughter, whose life was irrevocably changed by the sudden and untimely death of her father. Moving on to the next case. Marcel Chandler. In 1999, 24-year-old Marcel Chandler lived in Mobile, Alabama. He worked as a waiter at an Applebee's restaurant on Airport Boulevard and was known for his friendly nature, always going out of his way to greet others. At the time, he was also attending a local trade school, studying computer information systems. Marcel was a devoted father to his 4-year-old son. On the night of December 13, 1999, Marcel's body was found inside his crashed vehicle in the 4000 block of Cresthaven Road. His car had crashed into the yard of a home. It was believed that Marcel was a victim of a car crash, but the police noticed gunshot wounds on his body. The autopsy revealed that he passed away due to gunshots and not the car crash that he was involved in. On June 12, 2020, the police identified 42-year-old Mobile resident Jamel Thomas as a suspect in the case. Thomas has a long rap sheet dating back to 1997. It is unfortunately still unknown, but led police to Jamel Thomas. He is currently being held at a Mobile Metro jail on a $250,000 bond. On the June 23rd, a 40-year-old man by the name of Damon Wright was also arrested in connection with the cold case. There's also no information about what led police to Damon. Moving on to the next case. Susie Lampla. Susie Lampla was a 25-year-old aspiring real estate agent living in London. Known for her zest for life, she embraced each day with enthusiasm and excitement. Her future seemed bright, full of promise. However, on July 28, 1986, After scheduling an appointment with a potential client named Mr. Kipper to show a property on Shorolds Road in Fulham, Susie vanished without a trace and was never seen again. Susie's Ford Fiesta was found parked by another property up for sale on Stevensage Road, which was 1.5 miles from the appointment address Shorolds Road. Police compared the DNA of over 800 unidentified bodies, but none were a match to Susie. In the year February, convicted murderer John Kinnan is questioned but never charged with Susie's murder. Kinnan was charged in 1988 for the slaying of Shirley Banks. By this time, Susie had been declared legally dead, even though no body had been found. During the investigation of Shirley Banks' murder, it would be revealed that John Kinnan had a specific nickname in prison, Kipper. This was the same name that Susie wrote down in her appointment book as being the name of the person she would meet the day she went missing. Kipper is also another word for herring. Maybe a mocking message to the police that the false name given was a red herring for investigators. After 5 female prostitutes were subsequently killed in Suffolk, police interviewed the Suffolk strangler, Steve Wright, in May 2007 as he actually had worked with Susie in the early 80s, but he too denied involvement. To date, no viable leads have turned up and police have said publicly that they still believe Kinnan to be the killer. As Susie went missing around the same time as John Kinnan's crime spree, and Susie, like Kinnan's targets, was a professional woman. Moving on to the next case. Patrick Warren and David Spencer. On the evening of December 26, 1986, just one day after Christmas, Patrick Warren and David Spencer were out on a late-night stroll in Chelmsley Wood, located on the outskirts of Birmingham. Patrick was riding his new red bicycle, a Christmas present. Earlier that day, the boys had been seen by a police officer playing with other children in Meridian Park, where they were warned not to play on the frozen pond. After returning home, the boys told their parents they planned to visit one of Patrick's brothers later that evening. However, when they failed to arrive, Derek Warren, Patrick's brother, went searching for them the next day, only to discover they were missing. The last known sighting of the boys was just after midnight by a petrol attendant who gave them a packet of biscuits. Patrick Warren's brand new red Apollo bicycle was found abandoned by the petrol station near the trash bins. The petrol station attendant said they saw the boys walking towards the local shopping center. That would be the last time that they were ever seen alive. Soon after, the children were reported missing. Officers still speculated to reporters that the boys were playing some big game, or that they were simply staying with friends. They were not taking the missing children seriously. Police offered a $500 to anybody with information, believing that whomever the boys were staying with would quickly give them up, but no one called in any viable leads. In an effort to raise awareness, the supermarket Iceland utilized the techniques of an American ad campaign, which placed the pictures of missing kids on the backs of milk cartons. This would make the faces of David and Patrick present in 770 stores across England. However, no tips were ever proven to be credible. One major possibility is that Brian Field, who is living near miles from where the boys went missing, was somehow involved. He would have most likely utilized the same petrol station at which the boys were last seen. Brian Field was later convicted of the rape and murder of a Surrey schoolboy, Roy Chutile, which happened in 1968. But with no bodies and no direct evidence leading to him, Fields has never confessed or even been a prime suspect, largely because he was never investigated. All of the sex offenders in the area were questioned but ruled out. To date, the boys have never been found. Families' houses have been searched and investigated. The property of Brian Fields has been investigated as well. Rewards have been offered, ponds have been drained. There are no leads. The police consider this a no-body murder. Bill McGuire. In May 2004, 3 matching suitcases were discovered scattered across the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia. Inside one of them was the body of 39-year-old Bill McGuire. The chilling question arose: who was Bill? And what secrets did he possess that could have made him a target for such a brutal and grisly fate? Nestled in the heart of New Jersey, Woodbridge Township is a vibrant area where diverse cultures come together, creating a distinctive and inviting atmosphere. More than just a place, Woodbridge is a home full of warmth and rich stories. In terms of safety, The township is known for its low crime rate, offering residents a peaceful and secure environment. The parks and waterfront in Woodbridge offer more than just scenic views. They also serve as community hubs where families and individuals can relax in peace. However, beneath this tranquil exterior lies a chilling tale that shook the town, the story of Bill McGuire. This dark chapter serves as a stark reminder that even in the most ordinary places, unsettling mysteries can lurk. William Theodore McGuire, known as Bill, was born on September 21, 1964, in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Bill was the son of William Christopher McGuire and Ruth Theodora Sal McGuire. He grew up in Bloomfield and graduated from Bloomfield High School in 1982. Bill then pursued a degree in computer science at Rutgers University, graduating in 1986. After college, he worked as a computer programmer for several companies, known for his strong work ethic and earning the respect of his colleagues. In his free time, Bill enjoyed playing golf, fishing, and spending quality time with his family. He was known for his kindness and generosity, always ready to lend a hand to others. Charismatic and witty, Bill had a natural charm. He married Marcy Pollock in 1986, but their marriage was short-lived, ending in divorce in 1994. The couple had relocated to Virginia Beach in 1986, where Bill worked as an electronics technician in the Navy. Marcy, originally from Vernon, New Jersey, moved with Bill to Virginia Beach. Around 1990, they returned to the Atlantic City area, but it was in this new environment that Bill's behavior began to change drastically. He became heavily involved in excessive gambling and drinking, and it was during this time that Marcy noticed a significant decline in their relationship. The situation took a darker turn in 1995 when Marcy filed a restraining order against Bill after he threw rocks through her window, which led to their divorce. In 1998, Bill met Melanie Lynn Slate at a restaurant in Woodbridge, New Jersey, where she was working part-time while attending nursing school. Born on October 8, 1972, in the United States, Melanie Lynn McGuire, formerly known as Melanie Lynn Slate, grew up in Ridgewood, Middletown Township, New Jersey. She attended Middletown High School South and later pursued a dual major in math and psychology at Rutgers University, graduating in 1994. Melanie went on to earn her nursing diploma from the Charles E. Gregory School of Nursing, now known as Raritan Bay Medical Center, in 1997, ranking second in her class. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. When Bill met Melanie, their personalities complemented each other perfectly, and they quickly fell in love. They were married the following year in 1999 and soon started a family. In February, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, in February 2002, they had their second son. On the outside, Bill and Melanie's marriage appeared to be picture-perfect, filled with love and happiness. However, beneath the surface, problems began to surface. Financial struggles started to take a toll on the couple, with Bill's gambling addictions slowly eroding their financial stability. Though Bill had always been responsible and financially secure as a computer programmer, his growing addiction led to mounting debts, which in turn caused increasing stress on their relationship. Melanie, a nurse, worked tirelessly to support the family, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to make ends meet. In addition to their financial woes, Bill's gambling addiction also led to emotional turmoil. He would often disappear for days at a time, leaving Melanie to care for the children and manage the household on her own. The trust that was once the foundation of their marriage began to erode, replaced by suspicion and resentment. Despite the growing tensions, Melanie remained committed to her marriage, hoping that things would eventually improve. Melanie tried to help Bill overcome his addiction, but his struggles persisted, further straining their marriage. In February 2004, the McGuires were planning to move to a larger home in Warren County, New Jersey, and had closed on the new house on April 28, 2004. However, before they could move in, the unimaginable happened. On April 29, 2004, Bill disappeared from his seemingly ordinary life, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a family in anguish. Where did Bill go? What could have been the reason for his sudden disappearance? Weeks had slipped by without a trace of Bill. His absence left a gaping void in the lives of his caring wife and children. But little did they know that Bill's fate was far more extraordinary than they could have ever imagined. In the early morning of May 5, 2004, 3 fishermen, Chris, Don, and their children, set out on a fishing trip from Virginia Beach toward the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. As they headed north, parallel to the tunnel, they came across an unexpected find, a dark green suitcase floating in the water. Curiosity piqued, they hauled it aboard their boat. The suitcase was surprisingly heavy, and when they opened it, they made a chilling discovery: a black sack containing a pair of legs. Horrified by their find, the fishermen immediately contacted police. They wondered if there were more suitcases hidden in the depths of the Chesapeake Bay, each concealing another piece of a human body. Soon, started actively looking for the other missing pieces of this disturbing puzzle. Just days after the first suitcase was found, a student studying the nature reserve on Fisherman's Island made another chilling discovery. A second suitcase, identical to the first, was found on the beach on May 10, 2004. This time, however, the suitcase contained a human torso, including the arms and head. The search for answers 5 days after the second suitcase was discovered. A fisherman made the final, gruesome find. On May 15, 2004, a third suitcase, identical to the first two, was found floating in the Chesapeake Bay. Inside were the victim's pelvis and legs. With the Chesapeake Bay's vast expanse making the search area challenging, investigators decided to turn to the public for help. They released the victim's sketch in the media, hoping that someone would recognize him. Incredibly, it took only a few days for the sketch to yield results. Susan Rice and John Rice, close friends of Bill who hadn't seen him in weeks, played a pivotal role in identifying his body. When they saw a sketch of the victim on TV on May 21, 2004, Sue immediately recognized her friend's distinctive features. Initially skeptical, Bill's husband, John, soon agreed that the sketch closely resembled Bill. Recognizing their friend's face, they quickly contacted the authorities and provided important details for the investigation. They recalled that Bill had recently been involved in a physical altercation with his wife, Melanie McGuire, and had stormed out of their home. They assumed that he had impulsively fled to Atlantic City to escape, possibly indulging in a gambling spree to distract himself. However, weeks passed without any contact from Bill, raising concern among his friends and family. With Bill's identity confirmed, investigators immediately initiated a fingerprint analysis. Fortunately, Bill's fingerprints were on file and a match was quickly established. The once missing man was now the victim of a horrific crime. Bill's past was shrouded in mystery with rumors of gambling addiction, domestic abuse, and even a restraining order. Bill's ex-wife, Marcy Pollock, had also spoken out about the emotional and physical abuse she endured during their marriage. She described their relationship as deteriorating quickly after their wedding, with the situation culminating in a restraining order in 1995 after Bill threw a rock through her window. These allegations painted a troubling portrait of Bill's character, complicating the investigation and making it harder to pinpoint a suspect. Investigators now faced the challenge of unraveling the events that led to Bill McGuire's death and bringing the perpetrator to justice. The lingering question remained: who was responsible for his murder? Imagine a loved one vanishing without a trace, even if it's just for a day. You'd be worried and scared, and you'd do everything you could to find them. Even if you had an argument with them, you would still report them missing to the police. However, in this case, the police received no missing person reports from Melanie regarding Bill's disappearance after being away for almost a month. Instead of immediately reporting him missing, she sought legal counsel from a divorce attorney. On April 30, 2004, Melanie filed a restraining order against Bill, further indicating that she felt unsafe in his presence. The police were surprised that she hadn't reported Bill missing, especially after Bill's friends had helped identify the person in the sketch. This led the investigators to focus on Melanie McGuire, and what they discovered was peculiar. Just 2 days after the heated argument between her and Bill, she did something that raised suspicions. Melanie, believing that Bill might be in Atlantic City gambling, planned to drive there to search for his car. She said her goal was to annoy him by parking the car in the most hectic part of town. But interestingly, here was how people reacted to her. As the police began monitoring Melanie's activities, they also started tracking her phone calls. In the midst of seemingly ordinary conversations, the police discovered a crucial piece of evidence. In one of these intercepted conversations, Melanie talked to Jim Finn, an old acquaintance from nursing school who had a crush on her. After losing touch for some time, they reconnected in February 2004, with Melanie reaching out when she needed something. Knowing of Jim's interest in firearms, Melanie discussed Bill's behavior with him before his disappearance. Jim, still harboring feelings for Melanie, suggested that she obtain a gun for self-defense. However, investigators who listened to their conversations concluded that Jim had no knowledge of any plans involving murder. When questioned by detectives, Jim was surprised to learn about Melanie purchasing a gun and had no idea she was involved in any foul play. It was later revealed that Melanie had bought a .38 caliber handgun on April 26, 2004, from a store in Easton, Pennsylvania. This was just 2 days before Bill went missing. Despite constant monitoring and scrutiny, Melanie denied any participation, maintaining her innocence. There was another unexplained road trip, this time to Delaware, just 5 days after her husband's disappearance. Melanie had told Dr. Miller that she was actually furniture shopping in the early hours of May 4, 2004. However, investigators suspect that this trip to Delaware for furniture was a cover-up. The route she took would typically lead to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, contrary to the usual path, via the New Jersey Turnpike, toward the Delaware Memorial Bridge and Route 13, which heads south to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and Tunnel. She stated that this theory was absurd because Virginia Beach was an additional 450 miles away from Delaware. Considering the considerable distance, it was implausible to cover such a vast stretch within a limited time frame. Was Melanie McGuire truly acting alone? Or was there an accomplice involved? Maybe it was Jim Flynn. But why would someone go to such lengths for a girl he had a crush on years ago? Yet consider this. Could be someone else, someone closer. A secret affair, perhaps. Was it someone who would do anything, even kill for her? Dr. Brad Miller? He was a partner at RMA Associates, and Melanie worked as one of his nurses. The affair between them officially began when Melanie was 8 months pregnant with her second child, at least for both of them. After Melanie returned from maternity leave, she and Dr. Miller began a full-blown affair. It appeared as if they were falling deeply in love with each other despite their marital ties and young children. Investigators uncovered mounting evidence indicating Melanie McGuire's involvement in her husband's murder. Bill's car held a bottle of chloral hydrate, a sedative, along with 2 syringes prescribed by Bradley Miller, who had said the prescription was written in Melanie's handwriting. During the investigation, Jennifer Seymour, a state police computer expert, analyzed the computers and handheld devices belonging to the McGuires, including a desktop computer situated in their apartment. Her examination revealed that between April 11 and April 26, 2004, several concerning topics were searched online. Among the searches were inquiries about undetectable poisons, how to purchase guns illegally, how to commit murder, gun laws, and toxic insulin levels. Among all the evidence, the gun, the internet search, or the affair, one particular detail left people confused. It was the purchase of a $500,000 million house, which occurred right before his disappearance. They ended up placing a substantial deposit on an impressive home in New Jersey. This residence was quite lavish with a significant amount of land and carrying a price tag of $500,000 million. This seemed contradictory. On one hand, Melanie was growing closer to Dr. Miller, but on the other, she was making a major investment in a new property with Bill. On April 28, 2004, they were set to close on the house at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Melanie stayed in touch with Dr. Miller throughout as he pleaded with her not to proceed with the house purchase. He expressed the wish to be with her and build a future together. Melanie assured him she would handle it. After closing on the house, they returned to their rented townhouse. Bill, quite excited, called John Rice, reportedly in a very happy state. Melanie's final conversation that night was with Dr. Miller. She informed him that they had closed on the house and mentioned that Bill was asleep on the couch after having some red wine. Melanie planned to discuss matters with Bill when he woke, intending to request a divorce. Melanie recounted the events as a significant argument between her and Bill, stating that they had a fight in the early hours of the morning, around 3 or 4 o'clock. It all started regarding the house they were purchasing, with Melanie mentioning that she had settled for that particular house. Bill's reaction was immediate and intense, expressing dissatisfaction and stating that it wasn't what he wanted. He mentioned his preference for a cheaper house in Virginia, which Melanie refused, leading to an escalating heated exchange. Melanie further described that the argument turned physical, specifying that Bill pushed a dryer sheet into her mouth, revealing his fixation with dryer sheets during such moments. He informed her that he was leaving and wouldn't return, even instructing her to explain to their children why they wouldn't have a father. He communicated this through the bathroom door while he packed and made several trips up and down the stairs, continuously criticizing her. Her final words to him were a plea to stop. After discovering the suitcases, the police were finally on the verge of bringing justice to Bill. One crucial piece of evidence the police were eagerly seeking, yearning for proof of Melanie's involvement in the dismemberment, remained elusive. Despite thoroughly searching her home, they found no blood, no bullets, nothing. There was no direct physical evidence linking her to the murder. Over a year after Bill McGuire's murder, on June 5, 2005, Melanie McGuire was arrested while dropping off her kids at a daycare in Mattoon. She was charged with first-degree murder in what became known as the suitcase killer case. Melanie pleaded not guilty and was released on $750,000 bail. In February 2005, a grand jury indicted her on 4 counts, raising her bail to $2,100,000. She was again released. Another indictment later accused her of writing letters that obstructed the investigation. 3 years after the murder, in February 2007, Melanie's trial began. The prosecution argued that she killed her husband in 2004 to start a new life with her boyfriend. Lead investigator Prezioso testified that the evidence points to a well-planned murder. Melanie maintained her innocence, stating that her husband was a compulsive gambler who had become increasingly erratic. However, a spokesman for the New Jersey Division of Criminal Justice disputed her characterization, saying that there was no indication that Mr. McGuire was anything more than an occasional gambler. Melanie Gambler. Melanie's defense team argued that the murder and dismemberment could not have happened in the Woodbridge apartment because there was no evidence to support this claim. They highlighted the absence of blood, tissue, or DNA in the apartment, as well as the lack of a bullet or saw marks. Additionally, there were no testimonies from neighbors regarding gunshots or the sound of a power saw. 3 years later, on April 23, 2007, Melanie McGuire, 34, was found guilty of killing William T. McGuire, dismembering his body, packing the pieces in 3 suitcases, and tossing them into the Chesapeake Bay. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 63 years 9 months. She also received a concurrent 10-year sentence for desecrating human remains and a further 5-year sentence for perjury for lying to a family court judge about her husband's whereabouts after he vanished in February 2004. William and Melanie McGuire's 2 sons, whose identities are protected for their privacy and safety, were last seen with their father on April 28, 2004. Melanie dropped the boys, aged 2 and 4, off at their daycare as usual around 8:20 a.m. After their routine, the boys returned home expecting to see their father, but he was nowhere to be found. William and Melanie's sons were placed in the care of Bill's elder sister, Cindy Legosher, a realtor at the Weichert office in Franklin Lakes. Cindy, along with her husband, Bill Legosher of Wyckoff, New Jersey, were deemed capable of providing a loving and nurturing environment for the boys. They already had 2 adult children of their own, Laura Legosher and Max Legosher, and were experienced parents. When the question of custody arose, the 2 boys were sent to live with Cindy and Bill, especially since they were already a close-knit family. After Melanie was convicted of murdering her husband, her family initiated a custody battle with Cindy, but to no avail. As a result, William and Melanie's sons continue to reside in New Jersey with their aunt, uncle, and cousins, the only family they've ever known. In February 2007, during Melanie's murder trial, Cindy presented evidence that both of her sister-in-law's children, then aged 57, had been diagnosed with autism. Cindy had grown concerned about their well-being upon noticing their behavior and had them tested. Due to the protection of their identities, no further information regarding their current status is available. However, it's known that the boys have not had contact with their mother since before her conviction. If you've watched the entire video without missing a moment, you probably have numerous questions about the investigation and arrest. After looking at her history as a nurse and her caring and charismatic nature, it's hard to even consider if someone like Melanie could commit such a heinous crime. The high-profile nature of the case prompted range of opinions among viewers. Many believe that there are many gaps in the story, beginning with the fact that she doesn't quite appear to be capable of murder. Even if she had the motive, how could this small woman accomplish it all alone? Did someone assist her? Was she unfairly charged? Perhaps the jury overlooked someone? Or was the accusation entirely mistaken? If you're pondering these questions, you're not alone. Many people, including criminology professors Megan Sachs and Amy Schlossberg, doubt Melanie Maguire's guilt. They host a podcast, Direct Appeal, questioning her conviction, pointing out that Melanie doesn't fit the typical profile of a murderer. The key witness for the prosecution, a forensic ballistics expert, stated that the bullets found in Bill's case were identified as .38 caliber lead cutter bullets. Subsequently, they found an error on the gun manufacturer's website. What's particularly puzzling is that the website information was altered after the tragic incident involving Bill Maguire's murder. Investigators also examined the garbage bags found at both the Maguire residence and the location where Bill's body parts were discovered. The details revealed that these bags were likely produced at the same facility, on the same production line, and within a very short time frame. The investigator expressed confidence in their conclusion, backed by tests and results that indicated the bags came from the same production batch. Additionally, they pointed out the physical difficulties involved in dismembering a body, coupled with the absence of a convincing crime scene, adding another layer of mystery to the case. In a demonstration, 2 tests were conducted to assess the possibility of Melanie's involvement. The first test was a suitcase weight test, which aimed to determine if Melanie, who weighed 118 pounds, could have thrown a suitcase weighing around 80 pounds over a bridge with a guardrail height of 40 inches. The results suggested that a more manageable weight to lift would be around 40 pounds, about half of Melanie's body weight. Despite the movie about her case and ongoing public attention, Melanie continues to maintain her innocence, insisting she did not kill her husband or dispose of his body parts in suitcases. The case of Melanie Maguire and Bill Maguire remains shrouded in mystery, and there are still many unanswered questions. Was Melanie rightfully convicted, or did investigators overlook key details that could have pointed to someone else? If she was indeed involved, was she acting alone, or was there someone else helping her? The evidence against her is compelling, but as with many cases, the possibility of overlooked or misinterpreted facts cannot be ignored. Whether or not she was guilty, there are still open questions that could lead to a different conclusion or reveal new angles that have yet to be explored. Patrick Warren and David Spencer. On the evening of December 26, 1986, just one day after Christmas, Patrick Warren and David Spencer were out on a late-night stroll in Chelmsley Wood, located on the outskirts of Birmingham. Patrick was riding his new red bicycle, a Christmas present. Earlier that day, the boys had been seen by a police officer playing with other children in Meridian Park, where they were warned not to play on the frozen pond. After returning home, the boys told their parents they planned to visit one of Patrick's brothers later that evening. However, when they failed to arrive, Derek Warren, Patrick's brother, went searching for them the next day, only to discover they were missing. The last known sighting of the boys was just after midnight by a petrol attendant who gave them a packet of biscuits. Patrick Warren's brand new red Apollo bicycle was found abandoned by the petrol station near the trash bins. The petrol station attendant said they saw the boys walking towards the local shopping center. That would be the last time that they were ever seen alive. Soon after, the children were reported missing. Officers still speculated to reporters that the boys were playing some big game, or that they were simply staying with friends. They were not taking the missing children seriously. Police offered a $500 to anybody with information, believing that whomever the boys were staying with would quickly give them up, but no one called in any viable leads. In an effort to raise awareness, the supermarket Iceland utilized the techniques of an American ad campaign, which placed the pictures of missing kids on the backs of milk cartons. This would make the faces of David and Patrick present in 770 stores across England. However, no tips were ever proven to be credible. One major possibility is that Brian Field, who is living near miles from where the boys went missing, was somehow involved. He would have most likely utilized the same petrol station at which the boys were last seen. Brian Field was later convicted of the rape and murder of a Surrey schoolboy, Roy Chutile, which happened in 1968. But with no bodies and no direct evidence leading to him, Fields has never confessed or even been a prime suspect, largely because he was never investigated. All of the sex offenders in the area were questioned but ruled out. To date, the boys have never been found. Families' houses have been searched and investigated. The property of Brian Fields has been investigated as well. Rewards have been offered, ponds have been drained. There are no leads. The police consider this a no-body murder. Susie Lampla. Susie Lampla was a 25-year-old aspiring real estate agent living in London. Known for her zest for life, she embraced each day with enthusiasm and excitement. Her future seemed bright, full of promise. However, on July 28, 1986, after scheduling an appointment with a potential client named Mr. Kipper to show a property on Shorolds Road in Fulham, Susie vanished without a trace and was never seen again. Susie's Ford Fiesta was found parked by another property up for sale on Stevenage Road, which was 1.5 miles from the appointment address Shorolds Road. Police compared the DNA of over 800 unidentified bodies, but none were a match to Susie. In the year February, convicted murderer John Kinnan is questioned but never charged with Susie's murder. Kinnan was charged in 1988 for the slaying of Shirley Banks. By this time, Susie had been declared legally dead, even though no body had been found. During the investigation of Shirley Banks' murder, it would be revealed that John Kinnan had a specific nickname in prison, Kipper. This was the same name that Susie wrote down in her appointment book as being the name of the person she would meet the day she went missing. Kipper is also another word for herring. Maybe a mocking message to the police that the false name given was a red herring for investigators. After 5 female prostitutes were subsequently killed in Suffolk, police interviewed the Suffolk strangler, Steve Wright, in May 2007 as he actually had worked with Susie in the early 80s, but he too denied involvement. To date, no viable leads have turned up and police have said publicly that they still believe Kinnan to be the killer. As Susie went missing around the same time as John Kinnan's crime spree, and Susie, like Kinnan's targets, was a professional woman. Moving on to the next case.